Sometimes when a company wants you gone, they don't always fire you. They just stop pretending that you exist. You're still clocking in, you're still sending updates, but something has shifted. You feel it. And worse, you start explaining it away. Maybe everyone's just slammed. Maybe I'm just overreacting. You tell yourself if you just stay visible, stay helpful, and stay professional, they'll remember that you're still here. They won't. They won't, because you're not being managed. You're being phased out. This is what they do when they want you gone, but they don't want to be the ones to say it. And it hits all at once, like a flooded bathroom, a missed call from your doctor, and stepping in dog crap. Barefoot. I have been through this more times than I care to count. I've never been fired, but I have been pushed aside for reasons that I still don't know. No one has said that I messed up. I was still getting those appreciate you at the end of emails, which really is corporate for, bless your heart, but in a lawsuit safe font. So clearly, I hadn't completely died. I was just haunting the org chart like a corporate poltergeist and being kept alive for liability reasons. Then my manager, who used to rely on me for everything like I was middle management birth control, effective, invisible, and blamed when things go wrong, started getting formal. Not direct, just careful. I'd ask how things were going and he'd say, well, you're doing fine, just keep communicating. Which is corporate for you're gone, you just don't know it yet. They weren't firing me. That would have required paperwork and an actual spine. That would require a decision. They were managing me out, strategically, silently, and with just enough plausible deniability that I started wondering if the problem was me. Because when they're done with you, the facts stop mattering. They'll take the same behavior that they used to praise, and they'll suddenly call it concerning. You're no longer being evaluated in real time. You're being documented for the version of you that they need to justify letting go. This is what it looks like when a company wants you gone, but it wants you to type up the resignation letter, proofread it, and say thank you for the opportunity on the way out. But there is a moment, quiet, petty, deniable, where the story changes. And if you don't catch it, you'll rewrite yourself out of your own job. I'll show you where that happens. Sometimes you're managed out because the budget changed. Sometimes it's a reorg and you're now inconvenient. And sometimes you're just too competent to keep around without having to promote. But sometimes there is no story. Sometimes it's just plain old pettiness. Maybe you said something too direct in a meeting and someone decided that you were difficult. Maybe someone started a rumor about you that you haven't heard yet, but everyone has decided is true. Maybe your boss's sister wants to get your role and she just has a great attitude. I knew her. She preferred Word over Excel because Excel was too mathy. She now has direct reports and a budget. That was the moment I knew something has changed. Not in my performance, in their story about me. Who knows why it starts? And honestly, it doesn't matter. It happens. Managing someone out is easier than firing them because firing them costs paperwork and explanations. It costs confrontation, possible severance packages. And somewhere, someone out there has to say out loud, yes, we made this decision and here is why. Managing you out just costs your mental health. And that's free. It's passive aggression, corporate edition, and it works. Because instead of risking a lawsuit or a headline or an email that goes viral, they just make you uncomfortable enough that you eventually leave. Voluntarily, gratefully, quietly. They don't want a decision, they want deniability. If they fire you, they have to own it. If they manage you out, they get to say, oh, she just wasn't showing up the same way. They don't need facts, they need the optics. They don't need proof, they just need the right angle. They'll ice you out, reassign your work, and then say you were checked out. They won't say that they made your job disappear, they'll say that you disappeared. They'll bury your responsibilities across 3 teams, erase your name from the email thread, and then ask you why you're not being very present lately. Now, before they cut you out, they do make you beg. Not for your job, but for something much smaller, sadder, and way more humiliating. Do you know what's worse than bad feedback? No feedback. Bad feedback means maybe you piss someone off. No feedback, that's a countdown. And you're the one winding the clock, sending status updates like a toddler with a tambourine, hoping that someone notices. When they're done with you, they don't start with confrontation, they start with distance. And the first thing to disappear is communication. At first, it's subtle. You send something off that used to get a response and now it's nothing. No comment, no reply, not even a forced thank you. You just get a digital shrug. I could have attached a resignation letter or a raccoon meme and gotten the same result. Then come the check-ins, but they're no longer about work. They're about how you think things are going, which really is corporate code for tell us how broken you feel so we can quote it back to you later. You're not being asked, you're being baited. They want you to say, I'm not sure, so that they can write down lack of clarity. You think you're about to be looped back in, but you're not. You're being lured into saying something that HR can use later. You're not invisible, you're just inconvenient. You're still doing good work, but instead of praise, you get silence. Or worse, this vague managerial tone that's technically supportive but emotionally empty. I thought maybe everyone was just stretched too thin. I figured if I stepped up, offered help, stayed visible, they would start seeing me again. So I became aggressively visible. I was emotionally loitering and posting updates like a digital Labrador. I'd finish one task and immediately ask what else I could take on. I was delivering ahead of deadlines and pretending it was ambition, not desperation. Just circling back, hope this helps. I was cheerleading my own neglect. Now, if that sounds like you, I do have one-on-one, so book a time if you want to chat. We'll help get you unspiraled. But here's the real trick. They don't just stop acknowledging your work, they shrink it. Your projects get smaller, your calendar thins out. The meetings that used to drain you now haunt you because you're no longer invited. You're still technically employed, you're still on the all-staff emails, but when it comes to real decisions, actual purpose, you're out. And when you ask what the priority is, they say things like, oh, just keep an eye on things. Like I'm now the emotional support consultant for a team that's clearly moved on. They told me once to focus on my core priorities, which by that point fit on a sticky note and still had room for a doodle. They were really just trying to bore me into disappearing. And that's the game. They don't give you a chance to fix anything. They just rewrite the narrative while you're still in it. Here's what I know now. When communication dries up for no reason, it's not because you changed. It's because their strategy did, and you're not a part of it. And the longer you stay, the worse it feels because you're not just ignored. You're trapped in this weird emotional purgatory where you're supposed to keep proving yourself, but no one's watching and no one's asking. They don't need your work anymore. They just need you to look for the exit. The part of this that really sucks is that you can see it coming, but you convince yourself that it's something else entirely. They have a goal, and it's not what you think. One of my favorite red flags is when they put a performance review on the calendar that's off the normal schedule. It's not a warning, and it's not what I would call a conversation. It is a perfectly polished pile of nothing. The worst review that I ever got wasn't even mean. That's what made it so disorienting. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even specific. It was careful, really careful, which is a bad sign. It felt like a bunch of HR posturing, right? That's how you talk to someone that you've already decided to replace, just not this quarter. The phrases were all still technically fine. We're seeing some inconsistencies. There's an opportunity for you to take on more ownership. We want to make sure that you're set up for success. It was just really a buffet of nothing. It sounded like they copied it from a feedback generator that only speaks in euphemisms. And the part that really got me, they said that I seemed less visible. Less visible? Like what, have I been put in corporate hospice? Does this sound familiar? What was your sign? Drop it in the comments and I'll see you there. At that point, I was still doing everything that I always had. I was in the meetings, I was shipping the work, I was updating the documents that no one read, but everyone blamed when something went sideways. Apparently, I wasn't peacocking hard enough while saving their asses. I genuinely wondered if maybe I had checked out. Maybe I'd become the problem without actually noticing it. So I tried harder. I asked for clarification. I asked for goals. I asked if they could define what success looked like. And they said, it's more of a vibe. A vibe. Cool. So I'm screwed then. I'm failing a feeling. I don't know what to do with that information because you can't fix a vibe. You can only exhaust yourself trying. And that's when I started to realize that this wasn't a performance review. This was a paper trail. They weren't giving me feedback. They were building a case, a quiet one that sounded supportive if you read it quickly, but underneath was the message that they've already decided who I am now. And they just need enough documentation to make it official. They just needed enough vague language to make it look objective. It wasn't a review. It was a pre-exit interview. The goal isn't to help you improve. It was to destabilize your confidence just enough to either quit or start slipping, which then becomes the next thing that they can document. Because the review isn't a reflection of your work, it's a justification for what they've already decided to do. You haven't messed up, but they are going to start doing something that makes you feel like you have. And just to keep things spicy, they start rewriting what's already happened. I started getting emails about conversations that I didn't even remember having. One of them said, "Hey, thanks for aligning on this in today's sync." We didn't have a sync. We had a 2-minute conversation where I asked if the deadline has changed, and you said that you think so and that you'd get back to me. Apparently that counted as an alignment. Another one included the phrase, "Sheila has expressed hesitation around the new direction." No, I didn't. I asked who approved it and why it was completely different from the plan that we had spent 6 weeks building. Suddenly I was being documented for tone, not decisions. And the more confused that you get, the more it feeds the narrative that they're writing about you. She's disengaged. She's not aligned. She's creating friction. I wasn't creating friction. I was asking why my work kept getting reassigned like I didn't exist. I remember finding out that a project that I had led, like fully built from the ground up, had gone live without me. My name was off the email. I wasn't invited to the launch and I wasn't a part of the follow-up. But don't you know, when things went wrong, suddenly I was everyone's favorite. "Oh, I'm looping Sheila in for visibility." Corporate magic at its finest. When I had asked what happened, my manager said, "Let's just discuss that tomorrow." The next morning before I even logged in, I had an email in my inbox summarizing the conversation that we hadn't even had yet. It included phrases like alignment concerns or pending visibility and as discussed. Nothing in that email was true, but it looked official. It read like someone was trying to create a record, not clarity. I wasn't being excluded. I was being erased. And the only reason that they were still answering my emails was to build a paper trail in case I didn't go quietly. And now it's all in writing. This isn't communication, it's evidence. They're not clarifying, they're building a file. You'll get recaps of things that didn't need a recap, confirmation emails for conversations that you didn't realize needed confirming, and gentle reminders for tasks that you already did, as if they're setting a timer for when they can start calling you unresponsive. It's all framed as helpful, supportive even, but the tone is off. It's just polished enough to feel like a trap. Because it is. That's what all this covert documentation looks like. It's not just a file on your performance, it's the absence of interaction. They stop talking to you and start talking around you. Here's the truth. They don't need your side of the story. They just need enough context to make the ending feel justified. And by the time that you realize what they're doing, the damage is already logged, labeled, and timestamped. What comes next isn't a fix, it's a reckoning. Looking back, I don't wish that I had worked harder. I wish that I noticed how much harder they were making me work just to feel seen. That wasn't loyalty, that was hostage behavior. I wasn't trying to succeed, I was trying not to disappear. If I could go back, I would stop offering to help just to stay visible. Visibility without power is just bait. It gets you noticed, not protected. I would save every vague email like it was evidence. Because it is. If someone said great job, I'd save that. If I finished something ahead of schedule, I'd document it. If I fixed it, improved it, or prevented the disaster, they wouldn't have to remember it because I had already written it down. They don't track your wins, they track your absence. So you have to build your own case. And then I'd pick a deadline, quietly, just a date in my own head, not for them, but for me. A line in the sand for how long I would tolerate the weirdness without clarity. And when that line hit, I'd pivot. No warning, no explanation. I would stop giving extra energy to a story that they'd already stopped telling the truth in. And most of all, I'd stop pretending it was fixable just because no one said it was broken. Silence isn't safety, it's a setup. You don't need to decode the tone. You need to name what's happening and prepare for what's next. Because here's the thing, you're not waiting for clarity. You're stalling because you still want it to make sense. It won't. So stop asking them to explain themselves and start acting like you already have the answer, because you do. You can't outperform a decision that's already been made behind closed doors. And if they're doing everything except firing you, it's because they want you to do it for them. You don't need closure, you need a paper trail. What happens when you finally see the pattern, but you're still in it? They didn't fire me. They just made it impossible for me to stay. They stopped including me, but still expected me to perform like I hadn't noticed. They smiled during meetings and said things like, "We appreciate you," while quietly removing every piece of my job and giving it to someone else. And when I started asking questions and when I finally said something felt off, they smiled and they told me not to worry. They don't want a confrontation. They want confusion, because if you're confused, you'll hesitate. You'll try to fix it. You'll blame yourself. And if they're lucky, you'll leave before they ever have to admit that they wanted you gone. You weren't confused. You were just excluded. Not loudly, not publicly, just enough that if you leave, they can say, oh God, she was just disengaging anyway, wasn't she? And that's the plan. They'll make you feel invisible, then they'll say you disappeared. But now you know what it looks like, and once you see it, don't start overthinking it. Start preparing, not to prove anyone wrong, but to control your own narrative. They don't get to write your ending for you, ever. But you don't need another pep talk. You need someone to explain why the people who play the game badly keep winning. And yeah, I've got some thoughts on that and how that actually works. If you think that this was bad, wait until you see what's next. And yeah, it's personal.